deadly green plasma blast sizzled past Captain Robert Rice's head as he dove for cover behind the shattered remains of the tavern bar. This was the grim reality of being the galaxy's most elite soldiers, the only ones that could turn the tide in a brutal alien civil war. When Rice's squad of human special forces arrived covertly on Risia, posing as traitors, their mission had been clear: destabilize the despotic King Karos's regime and help the rebel factions fighting for freedom. Humanity was the newest player on the galactic stage, but their unrivaled combat skills had already made them the most sought-after mercenary force. Rice's team was the best of the best, and he knew that failure here could doom the Risian rebellion before it truly began. Just minutes earlier, he'd been negotiating an alliance with the rebel leader Thula over mugs of bubbling Risian ale. But somehow the secret police had gotten wind of the meeting between the off-world operatives and the revolutionaries. Now the tavern had erupted into a storm of laser fire and smoke as the king's guardsmen attacked in force. Rice glimpsed his sergeant falling in the onslaught, the man's chest seared by plasma. No time to mourn. He gave the hand signal and his surviving men returned fire, their advanced energy weapons punching through the guardsman's armor with lethal results. "Fall back!" Rice yelled to Thule over the din of combat. The rebel leader looked torn between terror and grim determination as Rice pulled him toward the rear exit. Together, the unlikely allies burst out into the twisting alleyways, plasma bolts chewing up the walls around them. As they fled, screams and explosions ripped through the city night, and the capital descended into chaos. They were well and truly trapped in hostile territory now. The spark of revolution flickered in the darkness. Rice gripped his rifle tighter and steeled his jaw. Come what may, he and his men would see this through, or die trying. This was the job they'd signed up for. Rice and his two remaining men, Reyes and Connolly, followed Thule through the winding alleys of the Xanthus slums, constantly scanning for signs of pursuit. The rebel leader moved with the ease of someone intimately familiar with the twists and turns of the city's underbelly. After what felt like hours of navigating the labyrinthine streets, Thula finally brought them to an unremarkable door, set into a crumbling tenement wall. A series of coded knocks later, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit underground room that stretched far back into the shadows. As Rice's eyes adjusted, he made out a dozen figures clustered around a battered table, strewn with maps and data pads. "My friends," Thule said, "allow me to introduce Zarakel and Galen Tarek, the heart and mind of our revolution." A striking woman with close-cropped hair and a wicked scar running down her cheek stood up and eyed the humans warily. "I know you're supposed to be the best, but after that disaster at the tavern, you'll forgive me if I have my doubts," she said in a clipped tone that spoke of military training. "Easy, Zara," soothed the man next to her, his pale features ghostly in the room's dim light. "I'm sure there's much more to our new allies than meets the eye." As Thule made introductions, Connolly immediately moved to tend to a rebel, nursing a nasty wound on his arm, pulling advanced medical supplies from his pack. Reyes drifted over to the table, studying the maps with interest. "Captain Rice," Tarek said, "your friend Thule tells us you may be able to help us strike a crippling blow against the monarchy." Rice nodded. "My superiors sent us to even the odds. Looks like that's going to be an uphill battle, but we're not in the business of backing down." Tarek smiled thinly. "I think we may be able to help each other, then." He tapped a schematic on the table. "This is a weapons R&D facility where I was forced to work on the King's secret projects. Chief among them was an experimental shield generator that could render our forces all but invulnerable." "And you want to steal it," Rice surmised. "Precisely," Zara cut in. "But the facility is locked down tight. We need a way to neutralize their defenses." Reyes looked up from the schematics, gears turning behind his eyes. "I think I've got just the thing. We'll need to visit the black market, but with the right parts, I can rig up an EMP device that'll fry their systems." "I like the way you think," Tarek said. They spent the next several hours developing an infiltration plan. Zara handpicked the most elite rebel fighters for the strike team. Reyes worked to assemble the EMP using components he'd gathered from the illicit tech stalls in the marketplaces. Tarek drilled them on the facility's layout and security protocols. At last, disguised as maintenance workers, they approached the towering black obelisk of the research facility. Rice felt the reassuring weight of his concealed sidearm as they bluffed their way past the first security checkpoint. So far, so good. Deeper in the stark corridors of the facility, Reyes placed the cobbled-together EMP device at a junction point specified by Tarek. This should overload their power grid and knock out the security systems, he explained as he armed the charge. Just as they reached the lab containing the shield generator prototype, a klaxon began blaring throughout the facility. Rice whirled to see one of the rebels standing at an alarm panel, a triumphant sneer on his face. "You fools!" the turncoat spat. "Did you really think you could outsmart the king's spy master? I've already transmitted your position. You'll all be dead in minutes." The doors hissed open, revealing dozens of heavily armed royal guardsmen storming into the room, energy weapons leveled at the infiltration team. At that moment, a concussive boom shook the facility as Reyes's EMP detonated, plunging them into darkness lit only by emergency lights. "Go!" Rice barked, capitalizing on the guards' momentary confusion. Rebel fighters surged forward, engaging the disoriented guards hand to hand. Rice glimpsed Zara snap a guardsman's neck with ruthless efficiency before snatching up his rifle and opening fire. Rice sprinted for the prototype containment unit, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge stray blaster bolts. He used precious seconds to deactivate the security locks with the codes Tarek had provided, then grabbed the shield generator. As he turned to make for the exit, he saw Zara take a plasma bolt to the chest, collapsing in a smoking heap. Reyes hauled the rebel commander over his shoulder while providing covering fire. All around them, the power-dampening effects of the EMP were beginning to wear off as guard weaponry hummed back to life. Rice and Reyes lock eyes, an unspoken plan passing between them. As Reyes and the surviving rebels dragged Zara out of the lab, Rice stood alone against the oncoming horde of royal guards. With speed and prowess beyond any normal human, he unleashed a storm of blaster fire, mowing down enemy after enemy with unerring accuracy. The remaining guards fell back in shock and fear, unable to comprehend the sheer lethality of this alien warrior. Rice ejected a spent power cell and slammed home a fresh one. He had to buy the others time to escape with the generator and Zara. Adrenaline surging through his body, he charged to meet the regrouping guards, prepared to fight to his last breath. In the royal place, a storm of fury was brewing. King Kuros paced like a caged animal as Spy Master Zevron Thule delivered his report on the rebel attack. The news of the stolen shield generator and the capabilities of the human mercenaries had the king seeing red. "This is the work of the Kalari Empire," Kuros snarled. "Only they would dare to interfere in our affairs in such a brazen way." "Perhaps, Your Majesty," Thule replied smoothly, "but in doing so, they may have provided us with an opportunity." The king rounded on his spy master. "Explain yourself." "These humans are a chaotic variable, powerful but undisciplined. Properly handled, they could be turned to our advantage." Kuros scoffed. "You play a dangerous game, Thule. Find the rebels and their mercenaries. Crush them without mercy. Those are my orders." Thule bowed deeply. "As you command, Your Majesty." But as the spy master departed, his mind was a whirl with possibilities. If he could somehow bring these humans under his control, they could be the key to finally toppling Kuros and seizing the throne for himself. Across Xanthus, word of the rebels' triumphant strike spread like wildfire through the streets. In taverns and market squares, commoners spoke of the off-world warriors with reverent tones, saying they'd descended from the heavens to bring justice to the downtrodden. In the rebel safehouse, Gale and Tarek worked around the clock to interface the stolen shield generator with their jury-rigged defense systems. Connolly had stabilized Zara's wounds, and already the rebel leader was back on her feet, strategizing with Rice and Thule for their next move. As he watched his men check their weapons and prepare for the battles to come, Rice allowed himself a grim smile. The spark of hope was catching. The royals would stop at nothing to destroy them now. But this was the job Rice and his men had signed up for, and they were just getting warmed up. In the shadowy depths of the royal palace, Spy Master Zevron Thule hunched over a glowing datapad, his eyes darting across streams of intelligence reports. The human mercenaries had proven far more troublesome than anticipated, and Thule was determined to find their weakness. As he sifted through intercepted communications and grainy surveillance footage, a crucial detail caught his eye. Captain Robert Rice, the leader of the human squad, had mentioned a daughter back on Earth during a private conversation with one of his men. Thule's lips curled into a sinister smile. "Got you?" he whispered, already formulating a plan to exploit this newfound vulnerability. Hours later, in a smoke-filled back room of Xanthus's most notorious gambling den, Thule sat across from crime lord Nezar Voss. The hulking alien's tentacles twitched with impossibly strong rage as Thule spoke. "These rebels murdered your brother," Thule reminded him. "Help me capture their human allies, and you'll have your revenge." Voss's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "What's in it for me?" Thule slid a credit chit across the table. "This is just a taste. There's far more where that came from if you put out a bounty on the humans, dead or alive." Voss's tentacles coiled around the chit. "Consider it done." Within days, wanted posters featuring Rice and his team plastered every grimy alley and neon-lit boulevard in Xanthus. The city's underworld buzzed with activity as bounty hunters and street thugs alike sought to claim the hefty reward. Rice and his squad found themselves in constant danger. Even a simple supply run became a deadly game of cat and mouse. One evening, as they traversed the rooftops of the industrial district, a plasma bolt sizzled past Rice's ear. He whirled to see 3 alien mercenaries in high-tech combat suits giving chase. "Move!" Rice barked to his team. They sprinted across rusted catwalks and leapt between buildings, the bounty hunters in hot pursuit. Reyes stumbled on a loose piece of metal, nearly plummeting to the street below. Rice hauled him up by the collar, then spun to face their attackers. Time seemed to slow as his enhanced reflexes kicked in. He squeezed off 3 precise shots in rapid succession. The mercenaries crumpled, their armored suits sparking and smoking. Rice's momentary relief was shattered by a woman's scream from the street. A stray bolt had grazed a civilian's arm. "No," Rice whispered, his face ashen. This was exactly what he'd feared. Innocent lives endangered because of their presence. Back at the rebel hideout, Reyes hunched over a cobbled-together communications array. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he wormed his way into the Royal Military's encrypted channels. "Captain," Reyes called out, "you need to see this." Rice hurried over, his brow furrowing as he scanned the intercepted transmissions. "An invasion fleet? Are you sure?" Reyes nodded grimly. "King Karos is using the unrest here as cover to launch an attack on Nemaria. If they fall, the entire sector's rebellion is finished." Rice's mind raced. They had to warn Nemaria, but how? He turned to Galen Tarek, who had been listening intently. "We need to get word to your contacts there." Tarek shook his head. "It could be a trap to expose our network. We can't risk it." Rice paced the room, then snapped his fingers. "I've got an idea. Reyes, how good are you at forging official documents?" Hours later, a royal decree began circulating through Xanthus and beyond. It denounced the rumors of an invasion as rebel propaganda, throwing the king's military into disarray. The attack on Nemaria was postponed indefinitely. With the immediate threat averted, Rice and Zarakel turned their attention to arming the rebellion. Under the cover of night, they led daring raids on royal armories across the city. Reyes guided them from the hideout, his voice crackling through their comms. "Guards approaching from the east. Take the second alley on your right." Rice and Zara sprinted through the winding streets, arms laden with liberated weapons. They ducked into doorways and slipped through secret passages, always one step ahead of the royal patrols. As they distributed the weapons to eager rebel cells, whispers of the humans' exploits spread like wildfire. In dingy taverns and crowded marketplaces, the common folk spoke of Rice and his team with a mixture of awe and hope. Unbeknownst to them, these stories reached the ears of young Prince Desron. Curiosity piqued, he began sneaking out of the palace to attend clandestine rebel gatherings. At one such meeting, Desron watched from the shadows as Thule addressed a crowd of workers and students. The rebel leader's impassioned words about equality and justice stirred something in the prince's heart. "For too long, we have suffered under the boot of tyranny," Thule proclaimed. But now, with the help of our human allies, we have a chance to build a better future for all Rizians. The crowd erupted in cheers. Desron slipped away, his mind awhirl with conflicting emotions. Everything he'd been taught about his father's rule was being called into question. Back in the palace, Spy Master Thule's paranoia reached fever pitch. He prowled the halls, interrogating servants and courtiers alike, convinced a traitor lurked in their midst. "Where is the prince?" Thule snarled at a terrified handmaiden. "Why does he keep disappearing?" As Thule's inquisition intensified, King Karos grew increasingly unstable. The humans and their rebel allies seemed to anticipate his every move. In a fit of rage, he summoned Thule to his chambers. "You promised me results," Karos roared. "Instead, these alien mercenaries make fools of us at every turn." Thule bowed low, sweat beading on his brow. "Your Majesty, I believe I know the source of our troubles. Prince Desron has been—" Before he could finish, alarms blared throughout the palace. Another rebel strike was underway. As chaos erupted in the corridors, Karos fixed Thule with a murderous glare. "Find my son. If what you say is true, he will pay dearly for his betrayal." Thule hurried from the room, his mind racing. He had to find Desron before the king's wrath consumed them all. The fate of Risia hung in the balance, and Thule was determined to come out on top, at any expense. The prince's agonized screams pierced the air, each lash of the whip drawing fresh blood from his back. Desron hung limply from the post in the palace courtyard, his royal garments in tatters. King Karos watched impassively from a balcony above. "Let this be a lesson," he bellowed to the crowd. "Treason will not be tolerated even from my own blood." But as Desron's cries echoed through Xanthus' streets, they ignited a fire in the hearts of its people. Shopkeepers shuttered their windows. Factory workers laid down their tools. In taverns and homes, citizens spoke in hushed, angry tones. Thule seized the moment. Standing atop an overturned royal transport in the city square, he addressed a swelling crowd. "Look at what your king does to his own son. If he shows no mercy to his flesh and blood, what hope do we have?" The crowd roared in response. Men and women surged forward, eager to join the resistance. Within hours, rebel ranks had swelled by thousands. In a secret workshop beneath the city, Captain Rice and Corporal Reyes hunched over a workbench strewn with alien components. Reyes's fingers flew across a makeshift control panel, coaxing new life from salvaged royal tech. "How's it coming?" Rice asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Reyes grinned, holding up a sleek rifle. "See for yourself, Cap." Rice hefted the weapon, marveling at its lightness. He squeezed the trigger, and a bolt of crackling energy sizzled across the room, leaving a smoking hole in the far wall. "Hot damn," Rice whispered. "With these, our people might stand a chance." Meanwhile, in a cavernous warehouse, Zarakel prowled between rows of sweating rebels. Her voice cut through the air like a whip. "Again, your enemy won't give you a second chance." The rebels, a mix of dock workers, students, and former royal servants, lunged at each other with practiced efficiency. Zara nodded in approval. These weren't the same ragtag volunteers who'd stumbled into her training sessions weeks ago. They were becoming warriors. In the shadows of the royal palace, Spy Master Thule pored over intelligence reports. His eyes gleamed as he uncovered a crucial piece of information: the location of Rice's daughter on Earth. With trembling hands, he activated a secure comm channel to a shadowy figure light years away. "I have a job for you," Thule hissed. "A simple snatch and grab. The target is just a girl." Days later, as Rice led a briefing on their next operation, a strangled cry escaped his throat. He stared at his comm unit in horror, face ashen. "No, it can't be." Before anyone could react, alarms blared throughout the rebel base. Two figures in stolen royal flight suits burst into the room, hands raised. "Don't shoot!" one shouted. "We've defected. We have intel on a weapons shipment, but we have to move fast." Rice's mind raced, torn between personal anguish and duty. He locked eyes with Zara, who nodded grimly. There would be time for his daughter later. Right now, they had a war to win. Hours later, Rice crouched behind a ridge, overlooking a winding mountain pass. Rebel squads lay in wait, their new weapons humming with alien energy. In the distance, a massive royal transport lumbered into view. "Reyes," Rice whispered into his comm. "You're up." A blinding flash erupted from a nearby hilltop as Reyes fired his jury-rigged EMP cannon. The transport's engines sputtered and died. "Go, go, go!" Rice roared. Rebels swarmed the stricken vehicle. Royal guards poured out, only to be cut down by precise sniper fire. Rice led the charge, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge plasma bolts with inhuman speed. He vaulted onto the transport's hull, wrenching open a hatch. Inside, a guardsman swung a shock baton at his head. Rice caught the man's wrist, twisting until bones snapped. A swift knee to the solar plexus sent the guard crumpling to the deck. All around him, the sounds of battle raged, but within minutes it was over. Rebels secured the precious cargo, massive plasma cannons that could turn the tide of the war. As dawn broke over Xanthus, the city buzzed with news of the daring raid. In every neighborhood, more citizens cast off the yoke of royal oppression, taking up arms alongside the rebellion. High above the ancient capital, King Kairos glowered from his throne room window. His fists clenched as he watched pillars of smoke rise from across the city. "Enough," he snarled. "I will crush this insurgency myself if I must." He turned to his generals, eyes blazing with madness. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Level every rebel-held district. I want this city purged of treason at any expense." As the king's words echoed through the war room, the whine of engines filled the air. Royal bombers took to the skies, their holds laden with enough ordnance to reduce entire neighborhoods to ash. In the streets below, rebels and citizens alike looked to the sky with growing dread. The final battle for Xanthus had begun. The roar of engines filled the air as royal bombers took to the skies, their holds laden with enough ordnance to reduce entire neighborhoods to ash. Citizens and rebels alike looked up in horror, realizing the full extent of King Kairos's madness. Captain Rice's voice crackled over the rebel comms. "All units, scatter and take cover. Reyes, jam their targeting systems." Corporal Reyes's fingers flew across his terminal. "On it, Cap! Deploying cyber countermeasures now!" The first wave of bombs fell, but thanks to Reyes's intervention, many missed their marks. Still, explosions rocked the city, shattering windows and collapsing buildings. Screams and the crackle of fires filled the air. Rice and Zara Kell sprinted through the chaos, rallying rebel cells. "Hit and run!" Zara shouted to a group of dock workers, turned guerrilla fighters. "Don't give them a stationary target." The rebels adapted quickly, using the tactics Rice had drilled into them. They struck from alleyways and rooftops, then melted away before retaliatory strikes could land. Royal troops, caught off guard by the ferocity and precision of the attacks, suffered heavy casualties. In a hidden bunker beneath the city, Galen Tarek's generator hummed, shielding the rebel HQ from detection. Inside, Rice hunched over a holomap with rebel strategists. "We need to take out their supply depots," he said, pointing to key locations. "Cut off their logistics, and we'll bleed them dry." Across the city, Zara led a daring assault on a royalist strongpoint. Her commandos unleashed salvos from their stolen plasma cannons, punching holes in reinforced walls. "Move in!" she barked, and rebel infantry poured through the breaches. The sound of approaching footsteps made Rice spin, weapon raised. But it was Prince Desron who stumbled into the command center, his back still raw from the public whipping. "Captain," Desron gasped, "I want to help. My father has gone too far." Rice studied the young prince, weighing his sincerity. "What can you offer us?" Desron's eyes gleamed. "I know where they keep the experimental weapons." Hours later, Rice and his squad crouched behind cover near a heavily guarded munitions bunker. Plasma bolts sizzled overhead as royal guards put up fierce resistance. "Reyes, we need an opening!" Rice shouted into his comm. "You got it, boss," came the reply. Moments later, the facility's defense turrets swiveled and opened fire on their own troops. In the confusion, Rice's team surged forward. They fought their way through winding corridors, Rice's enhanced reflexes allowing him to drop guards before they could even raise their weapons. At last, they reached the vault. "By the stars," breathed one of the rebels as the door slid open. Row upon row of sleek, menacing plasma mortars gleamed in the low light. "Load 'em up," Rice ordered. "We've got a city to save." As they made their escape, alarms blared throughout the compound. Rice tossed a handful of breaching charges behind them, collapsing the tunnel and buying precious seconds. Across Xanthus, the tide began to turn. Rebel mortar crews rained devastation on Loyalist positions. Whole districts fell as citizens, emboldened by the rebels' success, took up arms against their oppressors. In the royal palace, King Karos's eyes blazed with madness as he watched his city burn. "Enough!" he roared. "Activate the planetary defense grid." Massive cannons, designed to repel orbital invasions, swiveled towards the city below. The air crackled with energy as they prepared to fire. "Sir," a technician cried, "we can't target specific rebel positions. The blast radius is too large." Karos sneered. "I don't care. Fire on everything." The first salvo of kinetic projectiles slammed into Xanthus with apocalyptic force. Entire city blocks vanished in plumes of debris and fire. Loyalist and rebel alike were pulverized as the Mad King sought to rule over ashes. In the rebel HQ, alarms blared. "We're being wiped out," someone shouted. Rice turned to Reyes. "Can you shut it down?" The corporal's face was grim. "Maybe. There's a flaw in the network's code, but I'd have to access the control complex directly." "Then that's our play," Rice said. He clasped Reyes' shoulder. "You're our only shot." As Reyes gathered his gear, Rice activated the command channel. "All units, this is Captain Rice. We're launching our final push. Whatever happens, it's been an honor serving with you all." Outside, the city burned. But amidst the devastation, the rebellion still fought on. The city burned, but the rebellion fought on. Captain Rice's voice crackled over the comm, rallying his forces for one final push. Zara Kell's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the palace's outer defenses. With a sharp hand signal, she led her squad forward. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Zara's team breached the perimeter. Royal guards fell before the rebels' stolen weaponry, their formations crumbling under the assault. Zara vaulted over a barricade, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to dispatch 2 guards before they could raise their weapons. Meanwhile, Rice's squad cut through the last line of Praetorian guards blocking access to the throne room. The captain's modified rifle spat bursts of energy, dropping elite soldiers with surgical precision. As they neared the massive doors, Rice felt a chill run down his spine. Inside the throne room, King Karos's eyes blazed with madness. His fingers danced across a control panel, activating a sequence he'd prayed he'd never use. "Let them all burn," he snarled. Across Xanthus, sealed vaults hissed open. Swarms of sleek, deadly machines poured forth. Hunter-killer drones designed for one purpose: extermination. The throne room doors exploded inward as Rice's team breached the chamber. For a moment, all was still. Then chaos erupted. Drones flooded the grand hall, their microfilament weapons slicing through the air. "Reyes!" Rice shouted, dodging a lethal burst. "Can you shut these things down?" The corporal dove for cover, pulling out his hacking equipment. "Working on it, Cap." Rebel troops hefted salvage plasma mortars, unleashing devastating volleys into the drone swarm. Machines exploded in showers of sparks and shrapnel, but more kept coming. Rice moved like lightning, his combat enhancements pushing him beyond human limits. He weaved through drone attacks, each movement precise and deadly. His disruptor fire found weak points in drone armor, buying Reyes precious seconds. A towering machine, larger than the others, advanced on Rice. Its optics glowed an eerie red as it identified the rebel leader. Rice's eyes widened as he recognized the Alpha-class drone, Karos's personal safeguard. He ducked and rolled, but the Alpha was too fast. A neutron sting lashed out, catching Rice in the side. He fell to one knee, gritting his teeth against the searing pain. The Alpha loomed over him, weapon primed for execution. Rice closed his eyes, waiting for the end. A deafening boom shook the chamber. Rice's eyes snapped open to see the Alpha drone consumed by an explosion of electrified shrapnel. Through the smoke, he glimpsed Galen Tarek, the rebel scientist, clutching a smoking EMP device. "Galen!" Rice shouted, rushing to the man's side. But it was too late. Shards of metal protruded from Tarek's chest. The scientist managed a weak smile before the light faded from his eyes. Across the room, King Karo slipped through a hidden panel, but his escape was short-lived. Prince Desron, flanked by rebel commandos, blocked the tunnel's exit. "You ungrateful whelp!" Karos roared, raising a strange weapon. Desron's eyes widened in horror as his father fired. The protonic disintegrator's beam struck a commando, reducing the man to ash in an instant. Something snapped in the prince. With a primal scream, he hurled himself at his father. Both men tumbled over a nearby balcony, plummeting into the inferno below. In the throne room, Reyes's fingers flew across his terminal. "Got it!" he shouted. The remaining drones froze, their weapons powering down. Rice and Zara secured the chamber as Thule stepped onto the grand balcony. His voice boomed across the plaza below. "King Karos is dead! The tyrant's reign is over!" Cheers erupted from the liberated citizens. But as Rice watched the celebrations, a shadow crossed his face. The real work of rebuilding was just beginning. The cheers of the liberated citizens echoed through the streets of Xanthus, but Captain Rice's expression remained grave. He turned to Zara Kell, her face smeared with soot and blood. "We've won the battle, but the war isn't over yet." Zara nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon where plumes of smoke still rose. "Royalist holdouts won't give up easily. We need to move fast." In the days that followed, Rice and his human squad worked tirelessly alongside rebel leaders to establish a provisional government. Prince Desron, still bearing the scars of his father's cruelty, stepped into a leadership role with a mix of willpower and trepidation. As Rice oversaw the integration of loyalist troops willing to lay down arms, Corporal Reyes's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, you need to hear this." In a secure command center, Reyes played back a series of intercepted transmissions. Rice's face hardened as he listened to the coded messages. General Moloch, a hardline royalist, was rallying Praetorian forces and reassembling Karos's drone army. "He's calling Desron a collaborator," Reyes explained, his fingers flying over holographic displays. "Says he'll purge the human infestation from Rhesia." Rice's mind raced, formulating a plan. "Can you pinpoint their location?" Reyes nodded, bringing up a map. "Secret base outside the capital. But sir, they're mobilizing fast." "Then we strike now," Rice declared. He turned to Zara. "Gather your best. We hit them before they can organize." Hours later, Rice crouched behind the wreckage of a royal transport, plasma bolts sizzling overhead. The assault on Moloch's compound had devolved into a brutal firefight. Praetorian troops, their armor gleaming in the harsh light, unleashed volleys of fire from entrenched positions. To his left, Zara's rebel commandos advanced in short, controlled bursts. To his right, Private Connolly worked feverishly, applying Medigal to a wounded rebel. The soldier's gruesome chest wound knitted closed before Rice's eyes. "Reyes!" Rice shouted into his comm. "We need those drones offline." "Working on it, Cap," came the strained reply. "Their encryption's a beast, but I've almost got it." A high-pitched whine filled the air as the royalist drones froze mid-attack. Then, as one, they turned on their former masters. Praetorian troops cried out in shock as their mechanical allies opened fire. "Push forward," Rice ordered, vaulting over his cover. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to weave through the chaos, each shot finding its mark with lethal precision. The rebels surged ahead, capitalizing on the confusion. Rice spotted a familiar figure fleeing towards a waiting shuttle. "Moloch!" he growled. Before Rice could give chase, the ground shook violently. Moloch had triggered some kind of failsafe. The very earth beneath their feet began to liquefy. "Fall back!" Rice shouted, grabbing a stumbling rebel and shoving him towards safety. As structures collapsed around them, Rice's team fought their way clear of the disintegrating compound. They emerged to find Moloch's shuttle grounded, surrounded by Zara's commandos. The general snarled and spat as he was dragged before Prince Desron. "You alien-loving traitor!" Moloch raged. "There are more of us out there, waiting to strike. You'll never be safe. Desron's face hardened. Take him away. He'll stand trial for his crimes. As Moloch was led off in chains, Rice approached the prince. Your Highness, we need to talk about security. This won't be the last attempt to destabilize your rule. Desron nodded wearily. I know, Captain, but first we have a planet to rebuild. In the weeks that followed, Rice watched as Rhesia took its first tentative steps towards democracy. Ambassador Von Art arrived from Earth, bringing promises of aid and alliance. Yet even as treaties were signed, Rice couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. One night, as he patrolled the grounds of the former royal palace, Reyes appeared at his side. The corporal's face was pale. Captain, I've uncovered something. There's a plot against Von Art, Mokhtara mercenaries. Rice's hand went to his weapon. Where? I've already alerted Zara's people. They're moving to intercept, but... A distant explosion rocked the night air. Rice broke into a run, Reyes at his heels. Whatever came next, he knew the fight for Rhezia's future was not nearly finished. Rice's instincts screamed danger as he raced towards the explosion, Reyes struggling to keep pace. They rounded a corner to find Ambassador Von Art's quarters in flames. Alien mercenaries engaged in a fierce firefight with Zara's security team. Mokhtara, Rice spat, recognizing the distinctive blue-tinged armor. He shouldered his rifle, dropping 2 attackers with precise bursts. Zara materialized from the smoke, her face smeared with soot. Ambassador's secure, she reported, but this was just a diversion. Before Rice could respond, his comm crackled. Captain! It was Private Connolly, his voice strained. Prison break at the detention center. It's Moloch. He's loose. Rice swore, his mind racing. Reyes, coordinate with local forces. Lock down the spaceport. Zara, your team stays with Von Art. I'm going after Moloch. He sprinted through streets still bearing the scars of revolution, civilians scattering at the sight of his determined advance. The detention center loomed ahead, alarms blaring. Rice vaulted a barricade, plasma bolts sizzling past as loyalist remnants provided covering fire for their escaping leader. A stolen skimmer screamed overhead, Moloch visible in the passenger seat. Rice's enhanced vision picked out the heading, Keldora, the remote mining colony. Days later, Rice crouched in the cargo hold of a rebel dropship, surrounded by his squad and Zara's commandos. Reyes's fingers danced across a holopad, disabling Keldora's rudimentary defense grid. 30 seconds, the pilot's voice crackled. Rice stood addressing the strike team. Moloch's hold up with extremist loyalists. Intel suggests they've cobbled together some nasty surprises from salvage tech. Watch for drones and remember your armor's countermeasures against bioweapons. The dropship's engines whined as they touched down. Rice was first out the hatch, sweeping his rifle across the landing pad. Clear! Move! Move! They advanced through the colony's winding corridors, encountering sporadic resistance. A drone buzzed around a corner, its payload glowing an ominous green. Rice's shot pierced its core, the machine exploding harmlessly. Captain, Connolly shouted, we've got wounded. Rice turned to see a rebel clutching his arm, skin blistering from some weaponized contagion. Connolly was already there, medical applicator humming as it neutralized the threat. Good work, Private, Rice nodded. Push forward. They fought their way to Keldora's command center. Rice took point, kicking in the door, only to find it empty. Reyes, he barked. The corporal consulted his pad. I've got movement in the vehicle bay. Big signal, could be an APC. They sprinted through maintenance tunnels, emerging to see a hulking armored vehicle prepping for launch. Rice recognized the mercenaries providing cover fire, the same ones from the attack on Von Art. Take out those thrusters, he ordered. Zara's team unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, melting the APC's engines. With a screech of tortured metal, the vehicle lurched to a stop. Surrender, Moloch, Rice shouted. It's over! The APC's hatch creaked open. Moloch emerged, hands raised, his face a mask of contempt. You think this ends with me, human? You have no idea what's coming. Hours later, Rice stood before a hastily assembled war council. Prince Desron, Ambassador Von Art, and rebel leaders listened intently as he laid out Moloch's confession. This goes beyond Rizia, Rice explained. There's a network, planets, maybe even whole systems, united by one goal, stopping human expansion. Moloch was just a pawn. Von Art's face was grim. If what you say is true, Captain, we're dealing with a threat to every alliance Earth has forged. Desron nodded. Rizia stands with Earth. What do you need from us? Rice's eyes hardened. Everything, because whoever these xenophobes are, they've just lost the element of surprise, and I intend to make them regret it. Rice's words hung in the air, heavy with implications. The War Council chamber fell silent, each member processing the gravity of the situation. Ambassador Von Art broke the silence. We need to act fast. Captain, what's our next move? Before Rice could respond, Reyes burst into the room, his face flushed. Sir, I've intercepted something big, a series of coded transmissions pointing to Prax Station. Rice's eyes narrowed. The waypoint in the outer rim? What's there? Reyes pulled up a holographic display. It's a hub for our shadowy friends. I've identified multiple high-level operatives coordinating something. Whatever it is, it's happening soon. Prince Desron stood, his teeth clenched. Then we strike first. Captain Rice, I'm authorizing a joint operation. Take whatever resources you need. Within hours, Rice found himself aboard a stealth transport, surrounded by a mix of human soldiers and Rizian commandos led by Zara Kell. The close quarters buzzed with nervous energy as they approached Prax Station. Remember, Rice addressed the strike team, our primary objective is capture, not kill. We need intel more than corpses. The station loomed before them, a sprawling construct of metal and shadow. Rice's enhanced vision picked out the telltale signs of mercenary patrols. 30 seconds to breach, the pilot's voice crackled. Rice nodded to Zara. Your team takes the north quadrant. We'll push from the south. Reyes, guide us to those transmissions. The moment they touched down, chaos erupted. Mercenary enforcers swarmed from hidden alcoves, filling the air with plasma fire. Rice's team moved with practiced precision, human and Rizian soldiers covering each other's advances. A mercenary rushed Rice, vibroblade humming. The captain sidestepped, using the attacker's momentum to slam him into a bulkhead. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the mercenary and knocked him unconscious. Zara, status? Rice barked into his comm. Heavy resistance, came the reply, punctuated by the sound of gunfire. But we're pushing through. These bastards fight dirty. Rice's team fought their way deeper into the station. Reyes's voice guided them through a maze of corridors. 2 lefts, then a right. That's where the transmissions are originating. They rounded the final corner to find a sophisticated command center. Figures in ornate robes scrambled to destroy evidence. Rice's squad moved swiftly, subduing the operatives before they could finish. Secure the room, Rice ordered. Reyes, start data retrieval. I want every scrap of intel from these terminals. As his team worked, Rice surveyed the captured syndicate members. Their eyes burned with a fanatical hatred that made his skin crawl. Hours later, back on Rizia, Rice stood before a haggard Prince Desron and Ambassador Von Art. The intel painted a grim picture. It's worse than we thought, Rice explained. This isn't just about Rizia. They're coordinating attacks across multiple systems, and they have serious backing, credits, weapons, ships. Someone powerful wants humanity gone. Von Art's face paled. How long do we have? Reyes spoke up. Not long. I've decrypted messages hinting at a major offensive. Weeks, maybe days. Desron's fists clenched. We need to hit them first. Captain Rice, I'm granting you full authority to coordinate with Earth forces. Whatever you need. Rice nodded grimly. We'll need it all, because make no mistake, this is war. In the days that followed, Rizia became a staging ground for an unprecedented military buildup. Human astromarines drilled alongside Rizian shock troops. Starfighters screamed through the skies in joint maneuvers. Rice worked tirelessly, coordinating raids on syndicate cells across the sector. Each operation yielded more prisoners, more data, more pieces of the puzzle. But time was running out. Late one night, as Rice pored over intelligence reports, Reyes burst into his quarters. "Captain, we've got movement. A resource colony in the Mira system. They're under attack." Rice's blood ran cold. He knew that world. A fledgling human settlement, ripe for expansion. "Alert Desron. We need to scramble everything we've got." But it was already too late. By the time the Allied fleet arrived, the colony was a smoldering ruin. Thousands dead, infrastructure decimated. Rice stood on the bridge of the flagship Inexorable, watching the destruction unfold on view screens. "This was just the beginning," he muttered. "Reyes, any red on where they went?" The corporal's fingers flew across his console. "I've got something. A staging area near the Halcyon shipyards. Massive energy signatures. They're prepping for another strike." Rice's mind raced. The shipyards were vital to Earth's expansion efforts. If they fell, he made his decision. "Plot an intercept course. We end this now." The void of space erupted in fire as human and Rizian ships engaged the Syndicate fleet. Rice coordinated the assault from Inexorable's CIC, guiding squadrons through the chaos. "Bogies on our 6, a pilot's voice crackled. "They're not breaking off. Oh God, they're going to—" The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Rice watched in horror as suicide fighters slammed into Allied ships, their reactors going critical. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. But it was too late. A blinding flash filled the view screen as a fighter impacted Inexorable's hull. Klaxons blared. The deck lurched beneath Rice's feet. "Damage report!" "Reactors destabilizing," an ensign reported, panic in his voice. "We can't contain it." Rice's training kicked in. "All hands abandon ship. Get to the escape pods." He helped wounded crewmen into pods, fighting against time and the ship's growing instability. As the last pod jettisoned, Rice realized with grim finality that there was no room left. A hand grabbed his shoulder. It was a young soldier, already strapped into the final life pod. "Captain, take my place." Rice shook his head. "No time to argue. You know what to do." The soldier nodded, tears in his eyes. As the pod sealed shut, Rice saw him activate the emergency beacon. Then everything went white. Consciousness returned in waves of agony. Rice's eyes fluttered open to find himself in a sterile medical bay. Prince Desron stood at his bedside, his face a mask of concern. "Welcome back, Captain," the prince said softly. "You've been out for days." Rice tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "The battle. What happened?" Desron's expression darkened. "We lost the Inexorable and most of the fleet, but thanks to your actions, we managed to drive off the main Syndicate force, for now." Rice nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "We need to regroup. They'll be back, and in force." "Agreed," Desron said, "but Earth's reinforcements are months away. We're on our own." Rice's lips pursed. "Then we make do with what we have, because one way or another, we're going to stop these bastards." Rice's eyes snapped open, the sterile white of the hospital ceiling coming into focus. Pain radiated through his body, a constant reminder of the battle that had nearly claimed his life. He turned his head, wincing at the movement, to see Prince Desron standing beside his bed. "How long?" Rice croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. 5 days, Desron replied, his face etched with concern. "We weren't sure you'd make it." Rice attempted to sit up, gritting his teeth against the agony. "Status report." Desron's expression darkened. "It's grim, Captain. We lost most of the fleet. The Inexorable is gone, along with thousands of our best troops. Earth's reinforcements are months away." Rice nodded, processing the information. His mind raced, analyzing their limited options. "We can't wait for Earth. We need to act now, before the Syndicate regroups." Desron leaned in closer. "What do you propose?" "Get me Reyes," Rice said, his mind focused. "We're going to end this." Hours later, Rice stood before a holographic display, his body held together by painkillers and sheer force of will. Reyes, Zarakel, and a handful of surviving officers gathered around him. "Intel from our interrogations has given us a target," Rice explained, gesturing to a blinking point on the star map. "The Syndicate's command bunker. It's on a rogue dwarf planet, heavily fortified. Zara's eyes narrowed. A frontal assault would be suicide. Rice nodded. Which is why we're not going to give them one. We're splitting into 3 teams. Reyes, you'll lead a cyber warfare unit to disable their defenses. Zara, your shock troops will provide the distraction once the shields are down. I'll take a team of Astra Marines for a stealth insertion directly into the facility. The room fell silent as the gravity of the plan sank in. Rice looked at each face in turn, seeing a mix of fear and perseverance. I won't lie to you, he continued. The odds are long, but this is our only shot at decapitating the syndicate leadership. Any questions? No one spoke. Rice nodded grimly. Then let's get to work. In the days that followed, Rice pushed himself to the limit, training despite his injuries. He recorded a message for his daughter, entrusting it to Ambassador Von Art with a solemn nod. The assault began with a silent approach. Rice's team, clad in advanced stealth suits, plummeted through the dwarf planet's thin atmosphere. Plasma bolts screamed past them as they activated their grav chutes, smashing through reinforced bulkheads. Inside the bunker, chaos reigned. Reyes's cyber attack had crippled the facility's systems, and Zara's bombardment shook the very foundations. Rice led his Astro Marines through twisting corridors, dispatching syndicate defenders with brutal efficiency. They encountered monstrosities, techno-troops with cybernetic limbs and bio-augmented abominations that defied description. Rice's training kicked in as he improvised, using the environment to his advantage. He magnetized a corridor, sending unanchored enemies flying into a hail of gunfire. A scream cut through the comm channel. "Sniper down!" Connolly's voice crackled. "He's bleeding out!" Rice sprinted to their position, finding Connolly desperately applying Medigel to a gaping chest wound. The private looked up, his eyes wild. "We can't leave him, sir!" Before Rice could respond, a Rizian commander cut in. "This is madness. We must retreat while we still can." Rice felt the mission teetering on the brink of collapse. He grabbed the Rizian's shoulder, locking eyes with him. "Listen to me. Everything depends on what we do right now. If we falter, more worlds burn. Is that what you want?" The Rizian's determination hardened. He nodded, readying his weapon. Rice turned back to the wounded sniper. "Connolly, stabilize him as best you can. We're almost there." They fought their way deeper, losses mounting with each corridor. Finally, they breached the inner sanctum, a vast chamber dripping with alien opulence. The Syndicate's leadership cowered behind ranks of augmented bodyguards. The firefight was brutal and swift. Rice found himself locked in hand-to-hand combat with a hulking enforcer, cybernetic limbs whirring as they grappled. With a savage twist, Rice snapped the creature's neck, falling to one knee as the remaining oligarchs raised their hands in surrender. Rice's finger tightened on the trigger. It would be so easy to end it here, to avenge the countless lives lost. Connolly's voice crackled in his ear, weak but insistent. "Sir, we're better than them. We have to be." With a heavy sigh, Rice lowered his weapon. "Secure the prisoners," he ordered. "We're taking them in alive." In the days that followed, Rice oversaw the beginnings of a fragile peace. The surviving syndicate members were placed in custody, awaiting trial. Desron's government worked to rebuild, forging stronger ties with Earth. As Rice prepared to depart, he stood before Ambassador Von Art in the spaceport. "This victory came at a terrible cost," he said softly, "and I fear it's only the beginning." Von Art nodded solemnly. "What do you mean?" Rice's eyes hardened as he looked out at the stars. "The Syndicate may be broken, but their ideology lives on. There are still those out there who fear humanity's expansion, who will stop at nothing to halt our progress. This was just the first battle in a much larger war."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.